Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me immense pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Ms. Vasuta Agarwal, MD Asia Pacific InMobi, who will deliver the keynote address on the future of programmatic advertising. Vasuta is responsible for the P&L, revenue, strategic partnerships, and business for India, Southeast Asia, Japan, Korea, and ANZ markets. She has been with InMobi since 2012 and has worn many hats in her time from strategy to product development to business roles. Before her APAC role, Vasuta has led the India business for InMobi, headed business development for APAC, and helped set up the global partner management and online inside sales business for InMobi. Vasuta, I welcome you to Mobexx 2020 and I look forward to hearing your insights.
Thanks, Vijay. It's a pleasure being here today. Let me share my screen. So thank you for joining in, everyone. And I think huge kudos to the Adgully team for organizing this event again, like they do every year at this time of the year, in spite of the pandemic that has been raging, and seeing how our lives have completely changed in the last 8 to 9 months. I know it's been a very different and difficult years in a lot of ways, but I think, like Bijoya also mentioned, I think there is a lot of hope on the horizon, and all of us are hoping for better things in the new year. So, with that, let's take a forward-looking view. The topic I'll be covering today will be around the future of programmatic advertising. It's a very apt topic in terms of the current environment. I think, as all of you know, the digital ecosystem has undergone a huge transformation in the last 8 to 9 months. In some ways, it was forced on us, but I think it's for the positive because it pushes us in a lot of directions which are digital first. And I think programmatic, of course, is now a key part of that ecosystem. So let's talk a little bit about what's the current state of the programmatic ecosystem and what are some of the trends shaping the future. If you look at programmatic overall, it's been, of course, a phenomena globally. And in the last 5 years, you see that its share as a percentage of the total digital ad spends has been increasing year on year, where we used to be at about 50% about 5 years back. It's starting to cross the 70% range. So it's really become a big part of the digital ecosystem. If we bring it closer to home, to Asia and to India, you'll see that Asia Pacific contributes only about 5% of the total programmatic ecosystem. So it's actually a small share compared to other regions like North America and Europe. And similarly, if you look at the right, in India, programmatic still constitutes about 22% or so of the overall ad ecosystem, the digital ad ecosystem. So there is a lot of headroom for growth. And we do expect that these will be the future growth markets for programmatic. Let's talk about some of the trends that are shaping the programmatic industry. So, the first trend, which I'm sure all of you have experienced a lot in the last 6 months, 8 months of being at home, is the video on demand or the OTT phenomena. And this phenomena has really changed our lives in a very big way. If you look at a couple of years back, our entire content consumption was around television through broadcast or cable TV. But OTT applications have changed that, right from apps created by the TV networks or to content providers like Prime and Netflix. OTT apps are omnipresent, and you can view this content either on your mobile or tablet devices, or as an extension on even your connected TV or smart TV devices, because of just internet enabled on those devices, or devices like Fire TV sticks and so on being present. So the difference is that we've moved from a world of programmed content to on demand content, and a very personalized experience of watching that content because it's seen primarily on a personal mobile screen. Of course, this content varies in the way that you consume it. There's short form and long form content. Short form content is driven more by micro moments, by looking at short videos which are more snackable. They tend to be more mobile first, so they are more vertical in their orientation, and they're also much more personalized because of being primarily on our mobile. Whereas long form content, that's driven more by leisurely consumption, usually subscription based models, and there is a lot of original content that goes into building that ecosystem, and it tends to be multi-screen across both mobiles and connected TV. So, of course, if you see, the popularity of the video on demand ecosystem is universal. Almost every gender, age group, and household location across the country, you see the OTT phenomena being present. What does this mean for advertising? When it comes to programmatically advertising on OTT, there are a couple of considerations that you should keep in mind as you do this. There are things around the length of the ad, because it can be anything from a 6-second ad to a 90-second ad. What's that sweet spot of getting the best metrics, completion rates, and view through rates and user engagement? Usually good to have it in a 15 to 30-second window. Looking at things like, are you VAST compliant? Is it an in-stream ad or an out-stream ad? And also, whether you're buying it through an open exchange or a private deal environment. So all these things are considerations when you're thinking of advertising programmatically on OTT. The second big phenomena in this ecosystem is that of header bidding. Now, what does header bidding mean? I think we hear this terminology all the time. We've heard of, header bidding.
Shanta ma'am, we'll need
We've heard of header bidding also being called audience bidding, parallel or simultaneous bidding. So essentially, the world has started to move from the world of mediation and waterfalls to the world of header bidding. And if you see this next slide here, it gives you a picture of what's the difference between the two. The waterfall or the mediation model was a model which was about sequential passing of traffic. Once the traffic would come from the publisher to the first exchange, then go to the second and third and fourth and so on. So whatever was not filled by the first one would go to the next, and there would be a waterfall or sequential model here, and it was all based on just optimizing for the ECPM, right? The new model of header bidding, what it does is it does a simultaneous or parallel uh, allocation of the traffic to all the exchanges and networks. It's based on real-time data, and there is a lot more focus on buying the right user, targeting the right user. So it brings in a lot of benefits in that way compared to the traditional mediation or waterfall model. The first big benefit for advertisers is that it allows for equal access to premium inventory for all the exchanges or partners who are participating, because it unifies the auction and it allows everyone to bid into the auction. And because it creates that very true and fair mechanism for people to bid and find the right user, it also in the process maximizes the yield or the ECPM for the publisher, because there is a fair and unified auction happening for that user or for that inventory. Of course, because of this, advertisers also get higher quality and scale of audiences, because you have access in one go to the entire supply or inventory. And it brings far more transparency as well, right? Because ultimately, there is a lot of focus on getting that end supply transparency from the advertiser or marketer side, and this helps provide that. So definitely a lot of benefits in the header bidding world, and as the programmatic ecosystem moves more and more towards that. Let's talk about the third trend, which brings me to the point of transparency or supply path optimization, right? Now, what was the need for supply path optimization, right? Now, if you look at this picture, sort of what the view it gives you is that the entire ecosystem between the advertiser and publisher has a complex supply chain, right? You have SSPs, DSPs, resellers, networks, exchanges, agencies, there are a lot of players, and there was a need to sort of optimize this entire connection between the advertiser and publisher, increasingly being felt by advertisers across the globe, because there's a lot of inefficiency in this supply chain. It leads to increased costs. It leads to higher sort of platform fees. It leads to a lot of duplicate bidding for the same inventory. So there are challenges which advertisers have been facing with this. So what SPO or supply path optimization does is that it brings much more simplicity and transparency into that entire supply chain between the advertiser and publisher, right? What this means is that there is a trusted set of exchanges and SSPs that the advertiser works with, and these exchanges and SSPs all sort of have third party compliance, measurement, and tracking, so that there is that fair bit of trust established in the entire supply chain. They also make sure that around metrics around brand safety, quality, fraud free inventory, all of this is met, right? Because you want to make sure that you're getting access to the highest quality inventory as well. And of course, what it also does is it eliminates any kind of unauthorized resellers of the inventory. So through things like ads.txt, sellers.json, these are things which are ensuring that only authorized partners and sellers of the inventory are in the supply chain. And as a result of all of these efforts, it increases the overall efficiency and transparency for the advertiser, and sort of achieves that overall benefit that you would look at from programmatic advertising. Let's talk about the fourth trend, and this is something which is going to happen over the next 12 to 18 months, 24 months, but it's definitely something to start thinking about and be prepared for, which is a cookieless and non-IDFA world. Now, I'm sure most of you would have heard about the deprecation of the third party cookies, which is expected from 2022. And these third party cookies were a very important part of the digital advertising ecosystem, because these were what enabled publishers and ad buyers to actually identify users for advertising purposes, be able to target them, be able to measure ROI. So they have been an important part of the ecosystem. And now, with an effort to increase user privacy, there is a plan to deprecate these. Simultaneously, Apple has announced changes to its app tracking as well. Apple uses IDFA to track users, or that's the identifier of a user in the Apple or iOS ecosystem. And with the new changes in iOS 14 and even early next year, the expectation is that Apple will make it mandatory to get user permission for every app before the user can be tracked. So there is a strong user opt-in mechanism that will come into play, and only if the user opts in can they be tracked or targeted or shown sort of ads. So what this all means is that there is a strong trend towards user privacy, creating the right user opt-in frameworks for collecting any kind of data. Of course, it is the right thing to do from a user privacy lens. But what it means for advertisers is that this will impact the entire chain, right from identifying and targeting a user to optimizing your campaigns to measuring your marketing ROI, because the entire ecosystem is based on some of these identifiers. So when it comes to identifying or targeting, it will impact things like audience targeting, being able to do cross device retargeting, right? Optimization of things like ad rotation, frequency capping, all of these use these identifiers. And similarly, even measuring marketing ROI, because there is an impact on being on looking at things like web visits, on looking like app installs, transactions. All of these things use these identifiers. So, what can advertisers do to tackle this, right? What is the sort of some of the approaches to think about in a cookieless and a non-IDFA world over the course of the next 1 to 2 years? Of course, looking at alternate identifiers, that how do I identify a user without the cookie or without IDFA, right? So there are a lot of universal ID players who are creating user graphs. Some of the players are mentioned here. Working with cross device ID players, even multi-touch attribution partners who've started to create some of these alternate identifiers, and seeing how can that be used for all the advertising use cases that you may have. Similarly, investing in first party data becomes very important because then making sure that you have user opted in data which is privacy compliant, and you are starting to bring it in your own CDP, which is a customer data platform, or DMP, becomes very important from an advertiser or marketer lens. So that will of course require time, because you have to build the technology, you have to create the first party data ecosystem, and then start creating the use cases around it. But that's definitely something that requires that investment and time, given the changes that are expected to come in the industry. So with that, I think I'll wrap up the presentation and open it for any questions that may come from the audience.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for your time. I don't think I don't see any questions here yet. I think we can move on. We can move on with the session for today. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.